That's it. We're here. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first ever episode of Nerds and Nitwits, where we decide to get together and make complete fools of ourselves. But not really. For those of you who don't know who I am Chaotic Groot, aka Joel. I am the owner of this channel, and my fellow co-hosts are as follows. Who wants to go first?
Hey, my name is Michael. I'm also known as Prime Judge. I discovered that I was a nerd roughly around the age of 4 when it became apparent that I liked dinosaurs and trains too much. Upon revealing it to my parents, they decided to love me anyways, and thus I've lived through what nerdism is.
Hey, I'm Anthony.
We should have planned this
Also
out.
known as Noggin. I've been really into video games for literally as long as I can remember. Parents couldn't keep me down. My energy spiked when I played video games, and so the nerdisms kept going, and I went into tabletop RPGs as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm Dwarf or Cam, and yeah, I've also been a nerd for as long as I can remember. But I think I'm the only one of the three of us that hasn't DM'd ever. I've only been a player. So yeah.
Fair enough. Now, you all talked about how long you've been nerds. How long have you been nitwits?
I was born a nitwit. My dad looked at me and said, "Oh boy, this child is a nitwit." So
Is a nitwit, indeed. We are all a little bit of nitwits around here.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as what Nerds and Nitwits is literally not much. It's literally just we decided to put in this idea of sitting around talking about different nerdy topics, whether it's about gaming, whether it's about D&D, magic, movies, or anything of the sort. But that's just kind of what this is. There's no expectations. It's just a relaxed setting. At the moment, nobody else has cameras really, so it's just me. I'll probably turn it off and on every now and then because I don't really want to be the full center of attention all the time. You guys have any other expectations, thoughts, concerns, feelings, even?
not really. We're trying this out. We're figuring it out. So if people want us to talk about things, we'll talk about those things. If people are like video games more than Dungeons and Dragons or those things, then we'll talk more about that. We're still developing what this is, so that's pretty much it.
I mean, I personally would be okay with watching just a video of you, but that's my only expectation.
That's because you have just watched a video of me over the last 2 streams.
You're not wrong.
I mean, with some gameplay and stuff involved as well. Yeah, if you guys have comments, if you guys have questions, anything else you guys want to share, feel free to drop it in chat as we go along. Like I said, tonight is... Listen here, Garrett, shut up. As it is, we're going to edit that out later. Yeah, tonight's topic is all about D&D, and not really a versus so much, but just a comparison between pre-written campaigns and pre-written adventures like Tyranny of Dragons or Curse of Strahd, stuff like that, versus homebrew campaigns. And Ronan has given us a follow. That's always exciting on stream. I love that. So, hey yo. That means we are like one step closer. We are 20 people away from hitting affiliate on this channel, and that's kind of dope.
Heck yeah.
We need the viewers, we need the chatters. So if you're viewing us and not chatting, you should really get on that. If we can have at least 3-5 people chatting at the same time, it works out really well for us. But yeah, that's how it is. We're not here to change anybody's mind on any particular subject. If you like our opinions and decide, hey, maybe I should give this a try, that's dope as heck. But it's not really, like I said, it's not really a versus, it's just more of a discussion. So let's start with, what is everybody's general preference when it comes to campaigns? Do you prefer having a pre-written campaign, or do you prefer taking something from the ground up? Michael, let's start with you.
Well, as somebody who's ran a couple pre-written campaigns, somebody who really enjoys writing their own, I feel more comfortable in my own world that I get to create. I'm a big fan of taking pieces here and there and moving things around, so I do operate often within D&D lore. but I write it in a way that I can create my own story so that mostly to allow players who enjoy the D&D lore, they do not have to disconnect themselves from that world. They don't have to know everything about my world. They can know about both. So that's where I sit when I come to that page, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense to me. Uh, Cam, you've never actually, you said you've never DM'd a campaign, but when it comes to playing in them, do you prefer doing like a pre-written campaign where you kind of have some kind of knowledge ahead of what's coming, or do you prefer going in completely blind with a homebrew campaign where you kind of have, like Michael said, you have the base knowledge of the game, but you have no idea where it's going to go?
Yeah, I think my first campaign I ever played in was run by my stepfather, and that was a pre-made campaign. And I think for my first campaign, that was super helpful because it was so much more linear that I didn't really have to struggle as much with. I could get down the systems of the game and the way stats work and checking your spells and that kind of thing without having to focus on the ability to do anything. It was very linear. However, after that, I know for myself now that I've played in multiple campaigns that have been homebrew, and not learning as much. I think I really found that homebrew campaigns, especially if you're lucky enough to have good DMs at homebrew, is just a lot of fun. And the fact that, yeah, if they're creative, then you really can kind of do anything, and they'll be able to keep you on track, but allow you the freedom to play your character the way you want to.
Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense, especially from that player aspect as well.
Sorry, I'm just
Thank
getting
you,
some
Joel.
I'm just getting some requests to turn up some volumes here, but I can't turn up Cam or Anthony or Michael any more than they already are. So you'd have to do it on your own ends. But then this is the thing. This is episode 1. These are all technical difficulties that we will work on and perfect in future episodes, obviously.
Fortunately,
Anthony.
I can move my microphone closer, so
Yeah,
let
that
me
is
know
a-
if this is better.
Most likely. Anthony, you have done both DMing and played in campaigns. Do you have a preference at all?
Not necessarily at the moment, because I'm still fairly new to Dungeons and Dragons. I've been learning a lot. For the past year and a bit, I've been DMing, but I've only DM'd for pre-written, and I've only been as a player in homebrew. So my idea is a little bit interesting. I am currently working on a story for my players, which will be starting soon-ish. I've just been working out some of the details there, but yeah, I do enjoy as learning, especially with a bunch of new players that I did have. I was introducing like half my table to D&D. Having that pre-written idea is really really good because I can read through it and figure out what needs to happen and kind of what the idea is going on there. Regardless of whatever happens at the table will change because it can be very different with how the players play and what characters they make up and how much leeway you give them. So, but yeah, I've really enjoyed what I did with the pre-written, and I'm really excited to see what happens when I run a homebrew for the first time.
That's fair enough. Like I think I'm in the same boat. I think I've only played in homebrew campaigns, and I've never played in a pre-written campaign. Whereas attempted to run at this point. Attempted to run pre-written campaigns with. I've done a few one-shots that were completely homebrewed. I did a Christmas one last year, where my players ran through like Santa's workshop, and in the end they ended up ticking off Santa, who, as everybody knows, is a level 20 archfey. So that went well for them. But yeah, like when it comes to running them, for sure, I think Anthony and I really started at the same time. I think when it came to doing that,
Yeah.
when it came to running them, especially where for the first, actually not even the first, the whole campaign that I worked on, I think I had one, maybe two. I think at one point it was you and Kale were the only two people who had any experience with D&D. So having something that was pre-written was a lot less stressful than I think. I haven't done a homebrew yet like you, but felt a lot less stressful to know that everything was kind of pre-written, and we know the direction that it was going, and I knew the direction it was going, knowing that they 100% still throw you for a loop every time. Anybody who's DM'd a campaign will know that your players will absolutely throw you in a direction you are not prepared for.
That's part of the player's job, actually. You don't realize it, but in the D&D handbook, it often says, "Get wrecked, noob." I'm paraphrasing, but that's the idea.
You're not, yeah, no, that's basically it.
I think one of the biggest things, the things that I've come to appreciate with the pre-written, is that there's always a track of where you're going. You don't actually have to sit there and go, shoot, I don't know what's going on here. Everything has options for you already. Now, it does mean, though, that it can take longer to feed your way through the story, because you don't have the ability in the same way to play what I enjoy as dealer's choice or DM's choice. And the idea that if I make a dungeon, oh no, the first room you walk into is always going to be the one I wanted you to walk into. The players don't know that because they're exploring it, but I can sit there and have them explore it, but they could always end up in the right order that I am hoping they go through, or that they need to go through to progress.
Well, we know now.
You guys knew before.
Yeah,
It
that-
doesn't
that's
happen
something
often. It's way more with beginner players, but yeah.
Yeah, I'd never considered that, but it does, in some ways, for sure, allow you to railroad, for lack of a better term, without railroading in a way that they know.
Yeah, totally. Like it's something that I recently heard is like there is a multi-linear and then there's like a straight linear gameplay. So a lot of the I think most of the shorter pre-made campaigns are very straight linear. There is one main focus, one main objective, and you follow that objective. Whereas there is a couple of them that I've heard of is that they have multiple ways that you can go about how to go through it, and it's really good. Like this can go into how you homebrew. Some people like a more linear story, some people like a multi-linear. That's something that I'm building, is that there is multiple stories happening at the same time that I'll be building in with each character. And then there's also the idea of a sandbox, which I think is the most daunting task as a DM for a homebrew. Is like, okay, like we're starting here. Let's say we start in Neverwinter, and it's like, okay, you guys decide, like, what do you want to do? Who do you want to talk to? And you just go from there. And it's like it's really based on the players that you have at your table as well. But it's also a thing of like, okay, how do you like to run it? Because there is the multi-linear, is like there is multiple things, and you get to choose which thing you choose, but it's still kind of a setup going that way.
Yeah. And we just had a question here. Are pre-written stories written that can give you some flexibility as a DM, or is it a little more restricting? In that sense, from what I've seen player and DM, I would say more so the pre-written stories is a pick your own poison. As a player, you can reverse engineer the dungeon by accident. I've been in a campaign where we did that, and we ended up finding the back way in that was supposed to be the exit. We fought the boss first, we went through, got in the traps, and then fought the minions, and then got out and survived. But it becomes more that way, especially when you get into like people often, for when they say like the choose your own poison adventure, your classic the Mad Mage. The Mad Mage is a well-known campaign. It's just, I've never run it nor played it, but reading through it, it is an incredible opportunity to just go through this massive dungeon where each level is a new experience, new world, and so it's sort of episodic in that sense, but there's things carrying over from level to level. So there's straight lines drawn, but you as a player have to find them instead of the DM providing them.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's like the same thing. Even when the last first campaign that we ran or whatever, like they had all these different tasks that they could do in really any order, and they kind of did do them in any order. But then there was really random things that I threw in there that were not part of the campaign at all. For anybody who is aware of my stories, is that at one point they were coming into this cave. They just defeated a bunch of orcs or whatever it happened to be. And when they came out of the cave, all they could see was this massive green tail hiding behind a rock. Well, if you're a brand new D&D player, or even if you're an experienced D&D player, their first thought was, oh crap, we just ran into a dragon. And it turned into this whole session of them trying to figure out, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to approach it? And eventually they sent one of them basically out as bait to figure out what it was. Turned out,
good old player on a string.
Yeah, it turned out it was a dinosaur. It was a triceratops that they ended up feeding and befriending, and they kind of took along with some. See, Mr. Carlo knows. It just took along with them in their journey. That campaign ended, but that was just something I threw in there. Even with a pre-written campaign, like there is like this is what should happen. This is where it should go. But there's so much room to throw random stuff in there. People in my current campaign have encountered a little magical gnome named Wimble several times. He's been a shopkeeper. More recently, he's been the holder of the deck of many things. And they're literally just, it gives us the chance to throw random things in there without having to break the story at all.
Totally. It's something that I like did in the pre-made that I did. I took some different liberties. Some were of my own fruition. Some were a little bit forced upon me from the players. Where the main story I did Phandelver and Below, and turned that into the Shattered Obelisk, which was one that came out 2 years ago, and it was really good written start, because the Phandelver and Below is one of the original 5e pre-written campaigns, and halfway through it, the crew decided Waterdeep or bust, and they just went for it, and they're like, we're going to Waterdeep. I'm like, okay, I guess we're going to Waterdeep, even though like you start in Neverwinter, you go to Phandalin, and you never leave Phandalin. Like the entire campaign takes place in Phandalin. And not only did they not go to Neverwinter, but they went all the way to Waterdeep. And there was also like custom battles that I made on the side that were really good. There was a creature that was getting nursed as a little creature, a little plant in a pot named Garmafrond. Some shenanigans happened, and it got a Cloud Giant strength potion in it, and so I had 3 custom made monsters that had the strength of Cloud Giants, and they managed to defeat them to destroy it. And then I've also done a little Colosseum type fight as another filler kind of episode, because not everybody was there, but it's like there is room to do that, and it's all about like what are you comfortable with, what are your players comfortable with. There's a lot of stuff that's like one of my players did like zero out and their character died, but the roles were really good from the 2 religious characters in the game, that it just felt like this after a really cool battle with the dragon, they were able to like make a religion check, and it was really high, and I made a roll for the deity, and the deity failed it, which was impressive. And it's like there's a lot of room for your own take. You can take the linear part of it and just add your little spin to it, and add stuff to make it memorable, so that every single time that a player will go through that campaign, it can be different.
Yeah, 100%.
We got another question here. Do you guys talk about, like, to your groups about how do you agree or allow things in the game? Like, example, do you have NPCs and stuff? I think Cameron actually would have the best answer to this, considering he's played with the most, like, he's played with the most variety of DMs. Cameron, how have you found these things get put together with different groups?
Yeah, I've definitely. I mean, I think I consider myself really fortunate to have had only good DMs in my experience. I know, yeah, I've had UDM, I've had a friend DM as well, and I think for both campaigns, in particular those two there, was, yeah, good communication beforehand of what to expect. But uh, yeah, I feel like those DMs were also able to adapt well as the party kind of maybe changed directions a little bit throughout the game. But yeah, I really appreciated that. I think both you and this other person really set the tone well for what it would feel like. They communicated well about, yeah, do we enjoy more combat? Do we enjoy more role play, that kind of thing? And um, yeah, kind of trying to cater the campaign to what the group more enjoys, or at least a mixture, so that everyone in the group is getting to do some things they enjoy. So I know in the first homebrew campaign I played in, there were totally people in that group who like they just loved the combat, and then would just be dead silent during any role play type stuff. And then I mean I was playing a bard, so I was almost the exact opposite. Like yeah, I was doing role play all the time. So there were sometimes even whole sessions where the combat heavy people would kind of end up just chilling there, and then there were whole sessions where as a bard I'd like inspire a couple people, and then it would just be a big battle the whole time. So I appreciated it though, because yeah, they provided space for everyone to do the parts of D&D that they enjoyed more so, while still allowing everyone to yeah, be a part of it and to have fun.
Yeah. There's even, I'm just throwing it up on the little screen there. D&D with Beyond, and with the new book came out, the Player's Handbook. They came with this sheet with the game expectations sheet, which is now, I think, going forward, a great thing to have. I think Anthony and I were talking about this, and Michael, a few weeks ago, where it just gives, you can give it to your players, and it gives everybody a chance to talk about, like, potentially sensitive elements that they don't really, like, some people don't really want to deal with demons, and they don't want to deal with cults, and they don't want to deal with that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And so there's things like you could put a hard limit in there, or it's like, hey, let's discuss this, or handle this with like a little bit of carefulness behind it. You can add in their hopes and expectations for the campaign, so they can see kind of what they want out of it come into fruition, and then the DM has a better idea of, you know, this person wants to see more combat, and this person wants to have more interaction with characters or NPCs, and this person wants to, you know, they want to be the hero, basically, and all that. And then there's like the at table concerns, so like excessive swearing or shouting if people are drinking and they aren't comfortable with it, expectations like, hey, is it okay if we share dice, and that sort of thing. And I think that is a super helpful tool to have going forward as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I have used this sheet. I have sent it to my table for this upcoming campaign, and it has been very, very useful, because lo and behold, to me, quite a few of them shared the same sensitive elements. Like all of them had one specific element that was the same. Amongst all of them that they were not very comfortable with, and I looked at that as like, okay, this makes sense and whatnot. And there was a couple others that were really good, and like to have something formally made to just to let me know, was like, what are you guys okay with, what are you guys not okay with, is really good. I now know how to structure my next campaign to premise that better. And so I really like that Wizards did come out with this.
Yeah, and you talk about the NPCs and stuff, it's sort of expected that players are going to interact with NPCs. Sometimes they get brought along. I often throw them in when I know, oh, we need to advance the story, but certain people can't come. So I'm going to give them a couple NPCs to find in the town, and they can actually recruit them for a session or two while other people are gone, which is proven to be helpful. But I always go back to one of the guys who DM'd me when I was a player, and we ended up doing Tomb of Annihilation, and um, his name was Colin, and the thing that he had said was, you can have any NPC you want. I'm killing them first, because as the DM, you are required to sort of understand what they're doing. You're sort of actually playing their turn in combat, and that does become a lot. And so I also live by that. I'm like, I'll go for the NPC first. If you want to babysit something, I got it. And but like also the sheet, the idea of like prepping people and sort of communicating what's expected, that comes session to session too. Like one of my favorite things I do is I have a sword that a friend of mine made for me, and if I think that there's a potential death coming, I'll bring it and I'll set it on the table, and I don't have to say a single thing, but they know that there's a point where they could die in this session.
We all know
And
what
so
that sword means very well.
Exactly. And it's partly theatrical and all that, but also when you are homebrewing like I tend to do, I think there's two ways to do it. Either A, you go to the people you play with and you go, what do you guys want to play? What can I come up with? Even if you're doing pre-made, it's what kind of campaign do you want to play? And I'll go find out how to do it. Or it's, hey, I have a story and I would like to tell this story. Are you guys interested in being a part of this story?
Yeah.
And that's typically how I view it. Is I have a grandiose story idea, and I want to invite people in to explore it. But you do have to remember, as a DM, as soon as you invite players into that, it's a shared story. It's not just your story. And when they do things that aren't expected or aren't going along with it, you have to be aware that you invited them into that. And I think that sort of jumps into one of the questions that I saw in the chat, which is, what do you do with problem players? And I think that's like a good thing to even discuss now. Joel, what is how have you looked at that? If you want to share or not.
I've ended up pretty lucky. I haven't really had anybody that's really been a problem in any of my campaigns so far, which has been nice. There's a few things. There's definitely some touchy subjects or some like interpersonal relationships that went down that ended up having to have some private conversations that was never dealt with in front of everybody else. There was a few things that's like I have one player who love them dearly, but they get very f-bombing very fast. And I know that sometimes I can fall into it too, and so I have to remind myself, and I have to apologize. I'm like, hey, I should have toned that down a little bit. But it's even like short little nudges that's like, hey, maybe we could just tone it down a little bit. Sometimes it ends up having to be a conversation after the night is over, or even just shooting them a message privately, like, hey, maybe just like tone it down a little bit. I know some people are getting a little bit uncomfortable with the amount of like either volume of just the way they're saying it, or the tone of how they're saying it, or just like an excessive use of language sometimes. Again, very, very lucky in that regards that I haven't had to deal with too many issues. I know I dropped the ball for sure switching between campaigns, and I apologized to one of the players afterwards, where there was some interpersonal relationship stuff happening, and they basically I had a conversation with the main people of the group, and they agreed they didn't want them back, and I would drop the ball on messaging them to say, hey, we're switching to a new campaign. Unfortunately, you're not invited. And I know I hurt them a little bit in that process, and so we had a good conversation about it. I apologized for it. He found a new campaign, which, as far as I know, he's still very much enjoying. But yeah, I definitely dropped the ball on that one, and that one is definitely not. Well, he wasn't a problem player, but just due to extenuous or external circumstances, it turned into like a general uncomfortableness at the table, I guess you could call it. But yeah, I've gotten really lucky in that regards.
Yeah. And the biggest thing there is, I think all of us can say it, is a private conversation first is always the way to go with that. I've had players where they're like, you know what? My whole idea is I want to blow up everything. It's like, I'm great, but you just start getting murder hobo-y, and you really have to sit down and be like, why are you here? What do you want to get out of the story? Because I want to make this a group point. I have asked people to leave campaigns before. It's never fun, but sometimes you got to do it.
You know, you blow up one town, that's okay. You blow up 2 towns, you're starting to push it. That's the limit, I think.
The first thought that I
Somebody was part of a
had.
campaign where they blew up 2 towns, a hamlet, a hospital, and 3 churches.
Those
No.
almost all had good reasons behind them. So,
Almost. The first one, I made a mistake and gave you guys a bomb.
Good intentions, maybe not good reasons, but good intentions.
Good intentions, anyways. Yeah.
I have a question for Joel and Anthony, because you guys, in the last couple of years, you started DMing, and as far as I know, you have only DM'd or started at least with pre-made campaigns. Did you consider starting off DMing as like with your own homebrew campaign, and then decide maybe to start with a pre-made, or did you kind of just go with pre-made knowing homebrew might not be a good starting point as a DM?
I kind of had both, honestly. Like, I had the starter set, so I had like the short little starter campaign you do. I think I can't even remember, is it level 1 to level 10 or whatever it is? And I had that. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm probably going to start with this just because it's easy. That one is a little bit more disconnected because that one with Fan Delver is just, it's a bunch of tasks that are kind of disconnected, but you can do in any order. So it's kind of a good jumping point to let them have some freedom. I still have a homebrew campaign in mind that I started building back then. But I knew just with everything that was going on in my personal life and everything else that I knew I was not going to be able to keep on top of writing a homebrew campaign, trying to keep track of a homebrew campaign with every single NPC, every single enemy and encounter and all that. I knew I was not going to be able to keep track of that at the time, so I started with the pre-written campaign because of that. And it definitely helped a lot. Like, it took a lot of unnecessary, again, not unnecessary thinking or unnecessary stress, but it took just kind of a lot of it off of me, where I could spend like the night before or the day of our campaign night and just kind of look ahead at what they would probably encounter in that coming session, instead of trying to sit there and be like, okay, but if they do this, then I have to think about this, and then they could go this way, and then that, and then they might encounter this NPC too early or too late or whatever it happens to be. So I definitely started with a pre-written campaign. I don't have any regrets about it. I do still want to do a homebrew campaign at some point, so sometime in the future.
Yeah. I always wanted to do a homebrew campaign of sorts. I have these spurts of imagination, of little ideas, like, oh, this would be cool, and there's very difficult to find any basis for that. So I was like, you know what, these guys, it was midway through a summer, we were all working together, and there were some guys that expressed interest in D&D who have never played. And I was thinking to myself, like, well, they want to play. They're, like, as far as I know, all the DMs that I know of are taken up with their own parties and don't necessarily have room to start a new one. So I took it up, and I was like, I'll just borrow one. So Joel let me start off with The Lost Mine of Fan Delver. It was very, very good and very, very nice to be able to start that, so I could start from something. With that, I was able to just kind of start it off. And one of the players that I had, one of the new ones who never played D&D before, just knocked it out of the park with their backstory that I read. And when I read that backstory and we talked through it, I was like, this has potential for something awesome. And over the last year and a half, I was thinking of like how to turn this, because I was like, after the campaign we'll go into this homebrew, and then I thought of it as like, okay, I'm gonna twist something a little bit, and I can't say what yet because I haven't started it yet, but I've twisted it just a little bit to start from a lower level and work on that. Granted, now the players have given me new backstories for some new characters, and I've been able to make a little graph. I've got this application called Obsidian.
I love
It's
Obsidian.
it's so good, and I'm able to just, if I have an idea, I plot it in, and if I can figure out a way to connect it, I link them together to make a idea. And now I have four different subplot stories for this campaign that I've got coming up. It started with just the one, and as I went, I started to just make ideas, and I bounced ideas off of Michael to for the main antagonist for the one backstory, and it's so that I could be like, does this sound like cohesive? Does it sound like a good idea? Does it sound like I can actually make a decent story out of this? And so being able to start with a pre-made and then occasionally divert from that pre-made and just kind of play as it goes really helped me, because now I have the definite play style or DM style of, okay, I have a general idea of here's some key characters, but I think that it'll go really well that I'm pretty decent at the improv thought of, okay, this is where I want them to go. I'm gonna see how much I can divert them to go that way, but at the same time, it's like, let them play. I'll make stuff up as I go, and then I will just add notes to what happens and see where it goes. So yeah, it's been really good to start with a pre-built campaign and then use it to divert in my own way and kind of see how I DM when it's not in the book. So yeah.
Valid.
Nice. So, Michael, did you have anything you wanted to say on that?
No, really, I think everything was covered. You sort of, when you start to look into what you're doing, I really suggest starting with pre-made campaigns. They give you everything you need, and then from there you sort of can take some of their formulas and move them into your own idea. The one line, again, going back to my buddy Colin, a homebrew campaign is only as good as the what did he say? Sorry.
The sources
Your
you
homebrew
steal it from?
campaign is only as good as the like difficulty it is to find your references. So that's what it is. It's only as good as the obscurity of your references.
There it is. Yeah.
That's his line, and I think when you're doing that, you do have to do that because people start picking out things, and it's the classic thing of when the Witcher TV show came out. All of a sudden, grim fantasy was every homebrew. When The Hobbit came out, everybody had a dragon, like this huge diabolical conversation with a dragon, and it's some of these things. So trying to pull from those things that you don't always know or watch is some of the ways to do it. So like one of my favorite fantasy things is the Dark Crystal and that whole world that Jim Henson made, and so I pull from that all the time, and only people who've seen it will be like, oh, I see what you're doing there. So I think that's also another thing to when you start transitioning, is to find where are you pulling your inspiration from.
Yeah, for sure. Like my whole homebrew campaign I'm working on is so far is a mash of at least two different movies, and I talked with the potential players for that one and asked them, have you seen X and Y? And they're like, no. Why? No reason in particular.
Yeah, yeah, I've totally done that. I've totally done that.
Yes, you have, Michael.
Yeah, I remember. I remember the day you asked me. I'm like, have you ever seen The Dark Crystal? I'm like, the Jim Henson movie. Yeah. When I was a kid. Why do you ask? Just wondering.
No particular reason. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that segues really well into another question I had for you guys, which is just what are, well, it's kind of a two-parter. So there's two parts here of, what are some tips or tools that you guys would recommend for people who might want to start DMing for friends, whether it's just for ideas to add a little bit more to a pre-made campaign or to help them create their own homebrew. And then my second part of that question would be, what does the financial side of DMing look like? And is it significantly different if you do homebrew versus pre-made, or is it similar? That kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a
Go
good
for it, Michael.
question. No, it's all yours. I'm just sitting there going, that's a really good question.
Okay. So for starting for D&D, because I am fairly new to it and have been starting a homebrew one, my main thing is find a dungeon master who is open to talk about ideas.
Michael.
Being able to, yeah. Michael has been the main one for myself and Joel. He's the one that has DM'd for us for quite a bit. And so we bounce a lot of ideas off of him. He is extremely knowledgeable. He's been playing for a long time, and his storytelling is absolutely amazing. Like he's got so many ideas and whatnot, and it's awesome. So it's like finding a dungeon master who is willing to listen, who is willing to help you out, like not to necessarily like change your ideas, because if you find somebody who's like, oh, that sounds good, but here's this idea that it's like it's kind of like there's a certain line that you do in improv, not that I've done it, but that I've heard from many people. It's the yes and. It's like, yes, and you could try this, and yes, and you could do this. And so having somebody around who you're comfortable with saying, like, this is something that can be better. And so I've been bouncing ideas off of Michael for quite a while now. I was like, does this work? Is this a good idea? Here's an idea that I had, and being able to have somebody do that. It has become such a thing at my player table that I am the dungeon master of my group, and to them, they see Michael as the grand dungeon master, as a parent to grandparent and whatnot, which I think is absolutely hilarious.
Oh, they've said.
It is until one of them sits and goes, "Yo, it's the granddaddy dungeon master." You're like, no.
Yeah. So, yeah. But yeah. So that's the biggest thing that I find is having that person that you can talk to, who can bounce ideas off of, and also just how the game runs. Like I've almost been a dungeon master longer than I've been a player, which is kind of ironic in and of itself, especially with how new I am. Once you get further down the line, then it's not as surprising. Sorry, Michael.
Never DMs, man.
Yeah, man. But it's like being able to know that. Also, like finding different sources. Like I've like looking through different books, like read through the books, talk to people about rules, because some things can come up where it's like, this is not written in the rule book. So like go to like a subreddit go to like D&D Beyond and find the discussion channels there. Like, do your research, and it is okay to take a 5-minute break to reevaluate things. One of the things is like, in my first campaign as a dungeon master, I had a College of Creation bard, and that player is an extremely intelligent human being, of which every single one on this podcast knows this guy, and he is extremely smart. And I went to Michael, and I also talked to Cam and Joel all about like how this class works and how little is written about it. And so being able to like talk to them is like, oh yeah, this is definitely a thing. And then going to like Wikidot, D&D Beyond, Reddit, it's like being able to do that is good. On the financial side of things, like it can be as cheap or as expensive as you want it to be. I like having a little bit of a physical presence on the game. I do have some playmats, some minis, and then some various other tokens and whatnot. Some people can play Theater of the Mind. I am not that expressive when it comes to the general area, so a little bit of lines and whatnot has to go onto the map so that I can accurately display. If you do go, like, you really want to give it a real like sense of vibe, like you can add music. I have music, but it's not necessarily theme-wise. It's just general stuff, and it will be help with a vibe. Some people have TVs as their game map, and they'll have a very detailed map. Some people use it for pictures. Some people have 3D like built maps and tons and accurate figures and whatnot. And some people, I don't know how, play with nothing but dice, and they're able to do combat, role play, puzzles, all through Theater of the Mind, which I find absolutely insane. So it can be cheap, it can be extremely affordable, or it can be like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. But that's like whatever you can go with. It's like if you spend a couple $100, get some minis, get some tokens. Like I've got a couple just flat face tokens that have multiple different stickers so I can swap them out for huge, large, medium, and small creatures, a map, some markers, and whatnot. And so it's a little bit more items, but it's not like super expensive and doesn't cost me a ton of money.
Yeah, I'm going to start with the financial side of that question because I had my sister call me a couple, was that last week or whatever it was, and she said, hey, I have a few questions for you that I'm pretty sure you're the only person I know that can answer it. I'm like, hey, what's up? She's like, well, your oldest nephew wants to start playing D&D, and I went, really? You don't say! And the backtrack a little bit, that's where I showed her that expectations page as well, because it's with a local game store, craft store near their house, and I was like, hey, you should probably like print this out if you want to, give it to whoever's going to be DMing if there's something like you don't want to be him exposed to or anything like that. And then she asked me, how expensive is this going to be? And I said, it's not, or it will be. And she's like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, in reality, he doesn't need anything besides maybe a notebook and a pencil and a set of dice, which at max is like $10 maybe. Unless you buy like a really expensive liquid core set, whatever. But this whole shelf back here is just D&D stuff for anybody who's actually watching the screen. That whole top shelf is just D&D books. And I showed her that. She's like, oh my gosh. Like, what? I'm like, yeah, and each one of those is $70, give or take. I didn't pay that for all of them. and I do use most of them. There's a few that are like pre-written campaigns I haven't had the opportunity to use yet. And then I have like a whole box of just miniatures that I bought. And she's like, "So this what? I don't want to be sinking a bunch of money." I'm like, "You don't have to. That's the best part." Especially if somebody else already has all the materials. I'm like, you can start with nothing and be okay. Even for DMing, it's like Anthony said, we have maps, we have the markers, we have the minis, we have all that kind of stuff. But you also don't need it. Yeah, even as Mr. Carlisle says, you can use Lego for all we care. Kind of the same scale, honestly. And that's kind of the best part about it. If there's like campaigns that you want to do that you know of, like right now we're doing Tyranny of Dragons. I love. I was getting there. I love Tyranny of Dragons. I know some people love Tyranny of Dragons. It's been around for so long. There is multiple sources for a full PDF file of those books. I'm saying use that as a base point to get some ideas, and then go out and actually buy the book, whether it's from D&D Beyond or from your local bookstore. A lot of the ones in our town constantly have Tyranny of Dragons because it's so popular. But it's definitely a good source if you're just trying to get something started. But I would say I wouldn't just use a PDF source, as it's not entirely kosher, if you know what I mean. But yeah, like I feel like we're gonna have to like start splitting this pretty close. My last kind of point for that one, though, when it comes to starting a pre-written campaign or starting a homebrew campaign, is you can start a pre-written campaign, and if you want to start adding your own little things, start small. Like I said with mine, I just started adding in little reoccurring characters that keep popping up, like Wimble, my little magical gnome. He's been in every campaign I've done so far. Right now, my players were on the way to a city they've never been to before, and they were about to encounter a bunch of riders from that city that were going to help kind of expand the lore. That's not in the campaign at all. That's just something I threw in there to give them kind of a world building session to just sit and talk and get to know what the city is going to be like, and that kind of thing. So there's definitely little things you can do like that to start working into a pre-written campaign. And so there are a whole bunch of little things you can do, like adding little resources, little tidbits of, monsters that aren't in the campaign but could very well be in the surrounding area, or different NPCs that you can throw in to help them along. I know at some point, if it gets too tricky for some of them, I'm going to take my old character from our campaign with Michael, and he's going to become this helpful NPC because he already exists in that world, basically. So that's going to be one of those things where it's like, it's not part of the campaign, but he is a character I've made, and I can use and have an idea behind and an identity behind, and we can go from there. However, that being said, we are only scheduled for an hour for tonight, so we are going to hit a point where we're going to have to come back next week for a part 2. We're probably going to have to continue this discussion because we probably have a lot more to say, even just campaigns in general. If there's any last thoughts, now would be the time to add them. We have about 5 I know, only an hour. Because we didn't want to schedule for 2 hours and then have nothing to say after an hour. But apparently we have lots to say in only an hour. So
we picked a good topic.
We want you guys to have a whole week to ask us questions, and then we can filter through it. The one thing I can say is, do you know what the beautiful thing is? Is I go to my groups and I say, if you want there to be more minis, or if you want there to be more map stuff, I have birthdays and Christmas. Do what you will with that. And now I have a bunch of miniatures to paint, so there you go.
You say that, and I still have a in-package miniature set that one of our friends bought me for my birthday this year, that I was like, oh, I didn't know I needed those, but that's good to have.
Yeah.
Well, any other final thoughts for the moment? Any final questions we can pump out in less than 5 minutes? If not, feel free to DM any of us, whether you have us on Discord or have us on Facebook or whatever else. My Instagram, I will also drop, if you haven't already following it, which you should. Feel free to message my Instagram specifically for this channel. For any questions you guys want us to cover or anything else like that. We love to hear from you guys outside of this time as well, and that gives us time to work on things, stuff to think about,
yeah. We're also not just D&D.
It's true.
We want to talk about magic and movies and video games and board games and all of those things. So remember that those are all on the table. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. It was so great having you guys here with us. That made it so much fun.
Joel, I got one last question for you quickly.
Do it.
When is your next stream, and what are you going to be streaming?
Oh, my next stream, what is today? Thursday? My next stream is going to be Saturday at 2 p.m. PST time. I think I'm going to go back to Pokemon, honestly. I could not get into Path of Exile. I wanted to really badly, but I love Pokemon so much, and I love being able to just sit back. It's a chill. Like, in reality, Pokemon's a chill game, so I love being able to sit back and chat for a while. So I'll be back on Saturday at 2 p.m. Honestly, if any of the nerdy podcast crew, the Nerds and Nitwits crew, want to just join in our Discord chat while I stream and we can just chat, you also are free to do that. But we'll be here on this channel at Chaotic Root, twitch.tv on Saturday at 2 p.m.
Heck yeah.
Heck yeah. We will be back with Nerds and Nitwits next Thursday, I believe, is our general. We're going to try and be consistent with it every week. There are going to be some weeks where not everybody is available. So sometimes you might just get me and Cam. Sometimes you get me and Anthony. Sometimes you get the rest of them and not me. You never know. But we are going to try and be consistent every week anyways. So we will be back with Nerds and Nitwits next Thursday, same time, same channel. We will send out notifications on Instagram and Facebook and whatever else again. You can also subscribe to notifications on Twitch to get notifications that we're going live. So there's that too, if you follow us,
Pretty sweet. I can tell you that my life has been impacted tremendously by following Joel's stream.
La-ti-da.
And I mean his Twitch stream, not his other streams. Don't get weird about it.
I love it.
Don't cross the streams, boys.
Don't cross the streams. It's the rule at the urinal. It's the rule in Ghostbusters. We all know it.
That's gonna get clipped, isn't it? At some point, I do want us to all, if we have time and we're all together, to sit down at my actual table with, microphone in the middle of us and the camera, so you can see all of our faces, not just mine, or this random little logo we put together, but...
I'll drive all the way to Prince George for that. You just give me the word.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
We will, that'll be an actual planned time. That might be a special edition where we do an actual 2-hour session of us just sitting at the table and definitely not have drinks in our hands, But I think for right now, that is kind of where it's at. If you want, we'll be, like I said, we'll be back on Saturday for some Pokemon Soul Silver streaming. And if you just are interested in the podcast, we'll be back next Thursday. But we want to thank you for joining us on our very first episode. It has been a pleasure. It has been a great evening, I think, in my opinion. But we will talk to you guys next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining.
Obviously.
Adios, mi amigos.
Adios. Sí, señor. They can still hear us, by the way.
I was wondering.
That's okay. This is just gonna be the funny little outro of us whispering about it. Where everybody starts saying goodbye. Oh, Jacob talks right at the end!
Jacob, let's go.
So guys, I have a rash.
Oh, alright, that's where it's ending.